Ukraine's worsening territorial losses have raised alarm bells across the West, intensifying debates over the sustainability of its war effort against Russia. Despite receiving advanced U.S. military aid, including ATACMS missiles to disrupt Russian supply lines, the conflict appears far from resolution. Reports from the Washington Post suggest that Russia's relentless territorial expansion and military maneuvers have pushed Ukraine to the brink, testing the resolve of its Western allies. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's administration has staked its reputation on continued support for Ukraine, but concerns loom over what a potential Donald Trump presidency could mean for this fragile alliance. Biden's focus on bolstering Ukraine with advanced weaponry aims to maintain momentum on the battlefield. However, Reuters highlights that Russia has bolstered its offensive by leveraging unconventional alliances, such as recruiting North Korean manpower and acquiring additional arms. These moves reflect Moscow's evolving strategy to outlast Ukraine and neutralize Western efforts. In this chessboard of shifting alliances, Ukraine faces the dual challenge of depleting resources and an enemy that remains adaptable under sanctions. This evolving dynamic has sparked fears of a prolonged conflict, with Ukraine bearing the brunt. The stakes are particularly high as the U.S. approaches a potential leadership change. Trump has signaled an intent to reassess U.S. foreign policy priorities, casting doubt on the continuation of large-scale military aid. The New York Times reports Trump's inclination toward diplomacy, warning that his proposed peace negotiations might force Ukraine to concede territory. Such a deal, while attractive to war-weary Americans, risks legitimizing Russian aggression and setting a troubling precedent for other nations emboldened to redraw borders through force. European nations, though pledging solidarity with Ukraine, appear ill-prepared to compensate for a potential American withdrawal. The Guardian recently reported that NATO and the EU, already stretched thin, lack the capacity to replace U.S. military contributions. While countries like Poland and Germany have stepped up support, their efforts fall short of the scale required to maintain Ukraine's resistance. This dependency highlights a glaring vulnerability in the West's united front, leaving Ukraine increasingly isolated should U.S. policy shift. On the battlefield, the situation remains dire. Ukrainian forces are grappling with an aggressive Russian offensive targeting critical infrastructure, leaving millions without basic services. According to BBC, this strategy has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, further straining Kiev's ability to maintain its defenses. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has underscored the existential nature of the conflict, framing it as a global fight against tyranny. Yet his calls for international unity grow more urgent as the U.S. faces mounting domestic fatigue over prolonged foreign entanglements. The broader implications of a Russian victory extend far beyond Ukraine. Analysts from the Wall Street Journal warn that a triumph for Moscow could embolden other authoritarian regimes, such as China and Iran, to challenge Western democracies more aggressively. For the Biden administration, Ukraine represents a critical line of defense in a broader strategy to deter global authoritarianism. However, wavering U.S. resolve could weaken this strategy, reshaping the global order in ways that favor adversarial powers.